Okay, thank you so much, Your Royal Highnesses, government officials present, the civil society organizations, the press. We are about to start our second session, and may I request that all those that are still standing at the back, please go to your seat. Please go to your seat. We are behind Sheju. My name is, I'm sure you know me already. My name is Maggie Mwape, Executive Director of the Center for Environment Justice. I will be your moderator for the for the second session that we are going to start now until lunch. And these are three presentations that we are going to have. Excuse me, colleagues that are still standing at the back, we are behind Sheju. Kindly take your seats. I thank you. Thank you so much. The second session that we are going to have presentations from the Ministry of Water Development, Sanitation and Environmental Protection, and it will be followed with the presentation from the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, and this will be done by Mr. Shitima, Director Climate Change, and we are going to have a presentation from ActionAid. This will be made by Musonda, Kabinga. To get started with the second session, I will call upon Mrs. Mayando, who is the Senior Environmental Officer in the Ministry of Water Development, Sanitation and Environmental Protection. Mrs. Mayando. Okay, without wasting much of the time, if she's not yet in, I will call upon Mr. Shitima, Director Climate Change under the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, to give us a presentation that is going to focus on climate change policy implementation. Where are we as a country? Welcome, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Your Royal Highnesses, distinguished participants, as indicated, my name is Shitima. I'm currently heading the Department of Climate Change and Natural Resources, and I'm privileged to present to you an update in terms of the implementation of the National Policy on Climate Change. I'm not giving a PowerPoint presentation, I'm only making remarks in terms of where we are in the implementation of the national policy on climate change. To start with, Your Royal Highnesses, is just to highlight that the challenge of climate change is a serious one globally. Even with the COVID-19, HIV, AIDS, and global terrorism, the challenge of climate change is recognized as an existential threat that we face, which we need to address. Yes, COVID-19 has taken a lot of the attention because of the impact that it has had, but climate change threatens our very existence, not in the true distant future. So in responding to this, government adopted the national policy on climate change in 2016. So the policy that I'm providing an update on was adopted by Cabinet in 2016. The vision of this policy is to provide an umbrella framework for a coordinated response to climate change. And the reason why we need a coordinated response to climate change, Your Royal Highnesses, is that climate change does not just affect one sector. It is cross-cutting. It affects all the sectors. If you talk of water, you talk of agriculture, you talk of our energy, you talk of transport, basically all the sectors of the economy are affected by climate change. And so if you are to address it, it means you need a coordinated response, because you run a danger of duplicating both the efforts and the resources that you are spending in addressing climate change, and that is not efficient. So the policy was intended to provide this umbrella framework for a coordinated response to climate change. Its vision is for a prosperous and climate resilient economy by 2030. You will recall, Your Royal Highnesses, that our Vision 2030, as a country, we have a vision for 2030 to become a prosperous middle-income country. But what this policy indicates is that for us to become a prosperous middle-income country by 2030, we need to ensure that we are also climate resilient. Because I think we've had lessons, Your Royal Highnesses. You would know that there are years when our agricultural sector has failed us totally because of climate-induced droughts and all that, meaning that we could have plans, very well-crafted plans and ambitions of developing the country. But if we leave out climate change, if we don't ask the question, what if, so that we put in measures, then you'll find that we wouldn't. So attaining Vision 2030 of becoming a prosperous middle-income country hinges very much on us being climate resilient. So that is the vision of the policy. It has a number of measures, but I'll not bore you with that. What I'm here to provide is an update on where are we in implementing this policy. One of the issues to achieve this coordinated response on addressing climate change was institutional frameworks, to come up with institutions and structures that will help this coordinated response. And in this context, the policy provides for the creation of a council of ministers. At the apex of the institutional framework, you have a council of ministers. This council is chaired by the Vice President. Our Honor, the Vice President, chairs this Council of Ministers on Climate Change. It has all ministers from various ministries, close to 20, who sit on this council. The council meets twice a year, so it is functional. It was operationalized in 2018, and they meet twice a year. This is the supreme decision-making body on climate change, which provides guidance to the country in the responses that are being made. As I speak, the council was scheduled to meet today, but it has been rescheduled. The meeting will take place sometime next week. So that council is made to ensure that everything that is being done on climate change is reported to them, and where there is need for policy guidance, they provide policy guidance in terms of how to respond to that. Below the Council of Ministers, you have a steering committee of permanent secretaries. Again, this is a committee that consists of ministries, over 20 ministries that have a stake on climate change. As I said, almost all the ministries have a stake on climate change. This is chaired by the Ministry of National Development Planning, and the reason is to ensure that our climate change response is mainstreamed in the development planning process. Remember, the Ministry of National Development Planning is responsible for development planning in the country. And so if you want to ensure that whatever you're doing on climate change feeds into the development planning process, it is key that you have the Ministry of National Development Planning chairing that. So the permanent secretary from the Ministry of Development Planning chairs the steering committee of permanent secretaries, and they provide oversight on the implementation of climate change programs and projects. Below the steering committee, this is functional also, so I'm reporting on the progress. This steering committee has been established and it is functional. It has held several meetings and it meets every quarter. That means at least 4 times a year, but they can meet as and when need arises. So far, because of the COVID situation, the steering committee has held 2 meetings, one before the COVID and another one which was virtual recently. Below that, this is where we have a broad-based technical committee on climate change, which is not only made up of government institutions, it has the government ministries, yes, represented, it has the private sector represented, it has civil society. I'm glad to report, since this is predominantly a civil society meeting, we do have a seat on that technical committee on climate change for the civil society, and it is occupied by the Zambia network, the Zambia Climate Change Network. You have the private sector there, you have the financial institutions in form of the Bankers Association of Zambia, you have the other players sitting there. There's a total of about 33 different representatives sitting on this committee. So this is the committee that reviews all the technical work and makes recommendations to the steering committee up to the Council of Ministers. For example, at the beginning of the year, this committee looks at all the work plans and budgets of all climate-related projects. Projects that are beginning, which are focusing on climate change, are reviewed by this technical committee and then recommended to the steering committee for approval. In this way, we are able to detect where there are duplications, if organizations are implementing basically the same activities, so that you ensure that there is no misuse of resources and resources are used efficiently and effectively. It also meets 4 times a year, that's every quarter, and this is chaired by the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, because the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources is responsible for coordinating implementation, whereas the Ministry of National Development Planning is responsible for overall coordination on climate change. That distinction sometimes is confusing, but in practice, this is something that is working very well. Under that, we have a newly established department, which was also provided for in the policy. That's the Department of Climate Change and Natural Resources, which I'm privileged to head at the moment. So that department plays secretariat. It is the secretariat both to the Technical Committee on Climate Change and to the Steering Committee on Climate Change, while the Minister of National Development Planning is secretariat to the Council of Ministers. So the institutional framework that is meant to spearhead the implementation of this policy is up and running, and it is functional. In terms of implementation of activities, a lot of activities are being implemented in line ministries, which are monitored and reported on through these structures. Not only line ministries, civil society is doing a lot of work on climate change. You have the cooperating partners are also providing a lot of support to different organizations. At the moment, our matrix, or what you can call a database that we have created to look at projects that are being implemented, indicates that we're in the range of about 70-something different projects, 76 or so, that are being implemented by various organizations. These are either on adaptation, some of them on mitigation, a number of them could be called enabling activities, where probably it is on research, it is on technology and all that. So we have a number of activities that are being implemented. So that's on the implementation. Quite a number of activities are being implemented, but I wanted to highlight just 2. One is that as a country we are party to the international agreements. That's the United Nations Convention on Climate Change, and under that we pledged as a country what we are going to contribute in achieving the goal on climate change. So we have assessed how much we have done in implementing the NDC. We are at about 14% in terms of meeting our NDC targets, which we set, but at the same time we've already started reviewing and updating our national determined contribution, because we are required to submit a revised national determined contribution under the Paris Agreement this year. So the revision and updating of the national determined contribution has started. This will be supported by a number of works that need to be done. We have a number of consultancies are ongoing, some of them just initiated recently. For example, as a country, we have not done a comprehensive viability assessment for us to understand what are the sectors that are very vulnerable to climate change, what are the regions that are highly vulnerable to climate change. The last time we did that was in about 2004-2005 when we were developing the NAPA. But circumstances have changed and we need to revisit that and understand. So there is a consultancy that is going on that's initiated to review and provide us information on the vulnerabilities. It's only when we fully understand our vulnerabilities that we'll be able to develop interventions to adapt to that. So that's one work that is being done. The second work that is being done is to look at other sectors. In our National Determined Contribution of 2015, in terms of reducing emissions on climate change, we focused on 3 sectors, that is forestry, energy and agriculture. But as we submit a revised one, we want to add 3 additional sectors. This is transport, liquid waste and coal. There are reasons for that. I wouldn't want to bore you, Your Royal Highnesses, but my colleagues in the technical field understand why we are paying attention to these sectors. And so for us to add these sectors to the national determined contribution, we need to undertake inventories. And so there is work that is going on to undertake inventories on that. That will feed in the revision. The third area of work that will feed in the revision is on adaptation. Climate change, you respond to climate change in 2 basic ways. The ultimate is to reduce the emissions, because that's what is causing global warming. And if we are to address that, we need to reduce our emissions. That's mitigation. It's easy to measure your progress on mitigation because you just calculate the tons or gigagrams of the emissions that you are reducing. But it is important for us as a country to know and be able to track our progress on adaptation as well. Are we building resilience in the natural and human ecosystems? And so how do we tell? How can we say, no, now we have built resilience in our agricultural system, so even if we have drought or we have flood, we'll be able to produce food. We have built resilience in our energy system, for example. Even if we don't have water to generate electricity, we won't suffer the blackouts. So we need to have indicators that would help us track progress on building resiliency in the system. And this is the third and final area of work that is being done through consultancy to develop indicators that will help us to measure progress on adaptation. The final component I want to touch on in terms of reporting on the implementation of the national policy on climate change is legislation. As you know, policies are more effective when they are backed by law. So we've already commenced work on developing legislation on climate change. Cabinet gave approval in principle in 2019, and for the whole of this year, we have been working on developing a draft climate change bill. We have an advanced version, which is a second draft on the climate change bill, and we are now at a stage where we'll be coming to you stakeholders for you to have an input, to look at the bill and provide us input in terms of the content that it has. We had undertaken initial consultations just on the scope, just the framework, where we indicated that the bill will address the following issues, and that was the scope of the climate change bill. But we do now have content on that. We have a draft that will be subjected to stakeholder consultations. These will provide legal backing, including to the structures that I mentioned in terms of the institutional framework, but it will also make our response more effective, because then we'll have the backing of the law in our response to climate change. So, Your Royal Highnesses, distinguished participants, these are the few things I thought I could touch on to indicate how much we have moved in implementing the national policy on climate change. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shitima, for that presentation, well informing. I will request, just in case we have questions, and they are limited to we will allow only 2 questions. Any questions for clarification or for Mr. Shitima. Thank you so much, Mr. Moses Kazevu. Please, very precise question. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And just kindly allow me to write on the principles of all protocols as of being observed. If I heard correctly, the speaker has been saying that on climate change, they are giving us an idea of a coordinated response to climate change. But when I listen very carefully to the institutional framework, to me it sounds like it is all based on people that are restricted to urbanization. And when we are talking of climate change, we are talking of very big, vast areas of this nation that are possibly in the rural settings, although climate change is all over. Council of Ministers, Steering Committee, Permanent Secretaries, combined stakeholders, take 3 from different, is there any representation that has been put in institutional framework at district and lower levels? Thank you.
We can take a second question. I will give it to SEPA. Madam Ailes Muke, kindly go ahead.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Shitima, with your great presentation. But I just want maybe you to tell us, because I know that deforestation contributes much to climate change. I just want you to tell me at which rate in Zambia do we have the deforestation? Is it the same 250 to 300 hectares that we have had for over 10 years, or you have the latest? If you don't have, is there any way you can update the status of deforestation in Zambia so that we really know? Because I know that every day trees are being cut. So is there any way which you can do so that you can update us with the current status? Thank you.
I will allow Mr. Shitima to respond to the 2 questions. Mr. Shitima, sir.
Thank you very much. I'll start with the first question, I think from Mr. Kasebo. I think it's an important question. The issue is in this coordinated framework on responding to climate change, districts, lower level structures such as districts and provinces represented. Admittedly, not specifically at the moment, but like I indicated, at the ministry level, we do have, for example, the ministries of local government sitting in there. We do also have the Ministry of Chiefs and Traditional Affairs quite active in there, but we are cognizant of that need to ensure that the information and the decisions that are being made are flowing down to because in fact that is where the response to climate change is. For example, this year, I think the Royal Highnesses may agree, those who are in the House of Chiefs, I think it should be in February or so, when the ministry went to the House of Chiefs to share with them on a number of issues, we ensured that climate change was one of the issues that we went to share with the Royal Highnesses and get their input. So in terms of the structures, at the district level, at the moment, we do not, but we always work through the sister departments whenever there are interventions. For example, the forestry department is in each district, and we ensure that information that requires to flow is channeled in that way. On the question by Ms. Miles Muke on deforestation, yes, the challenge that has been on deforestation in terms of the figures has even been our statistics, because you recall that it's not too long ago when we were quoting 900,000 hectares per annum. Then we moved to quoting between 250 and 300,000 hectares per annum. But the current figure is that the current figure of deforestation is 271,069 hectares per annum. This was arrived at after the integrated land use assessment. I'm sure you remember that we had ILUA that was undertaken. This is what brought out this figure. Now, it may not mean that there is either an increase or reduction in these figures. It only shows the accuracy of the assessments that were being done, because while deforestation is very high, as this indicates, but there is also the importance of natural regeneration, particularly if we're managing the natural vegetation very well. And so you find that depending on the assessment that you take, you get different figures. But this does not underrate the fact that deforestation is very high. We just finished our third national communication to the UNFCCC, which we submitted on 24th of last month. And in that report, it still indicates that the bulk of our emissions, like you rightly pointed out, is from our land use and our agriculture and land use change sectors. Over 70% of the emissions comes from that sector. So we still need to have a lot of attention, and maybe it's a plea to our Royal Highnesses. You are custodians of our land and also much of the activities that are taking place. You could take interest on how you could help address the deforestation in your jurisdiction. It is very important. It has a bearing both on the rainfall patterns that we get and ultimately even on agriculture and food security that we may need to achieve. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shitima, for those responses. I will give an opportunity to His Royal Highness to give us another question, and this will be the last question. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm so on the climate change. One of the challenges we have on the climate change is charcoal burners. Now, chiefs have been blamed to say you are doing nothing about these charcoal burners, this and that. Now, according to your legal framework, what does the legal framework say? What does a chief, what do we have to do as a chief? Okay, you apprehend the charcoal burner. Where do you take him? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Highness. Mr. Shitima, kindly respond to that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness Chief Masha, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you for that important question. In terms of the legal framework, charcoal burning is regulated by the Forest Act. We have the Forest Act of 2015, and our forest officers in the different districts and the courts are able to enforce this act. So when charcoal burners are arrested, if they don't have documentation, because there are licenses that are issued in the regulated areas where they are supposed to produce that charcoal, but in the event that they don't have the documentation and they are picked up, the best way Your Royal Highness involve the forest department in the district if they are there, because they know how to enforce this act, including the confiscation of the equipment that they have used, the vehicles that are involved. The law provides for that, and these are taken to courts of law in most cases, and the sentences that are supposed to be meted out are done. But I admit that there have been challenges, Your Royal Highness, particularly with the capacity of the department. If you recall, in about 1997, during the restructuring process, the staff in the department was affected, where the foot soldiers, who are the forest guard and forest rangers, were shelved off. Those are the people who are working on the ground and controlling the activities in our forest estate. Those were laid off, and which has posed a challenge to the department. But government has started slowly recruiting forest rangers, and we hope that the situation may improve. Again, what the other step that is being considered by the Department of Forestry is the appointment. If you recall, Your Royal Highnesses, in the past, most of our village admin were appointed as honorary forest officers who could help with the regulating of foresting, particularly when it comes to control, because that's the issue that is also important. So that is my comment, Your Royal Highness, to that question.
Thank you very much. But then, why are the chiefs being blamed? Because we only have got authority, but we have no power to arrest somebody, to take him to court of law, to see that that is stopped. You see, for information, just for information, the forestry officers are the people who get their money. They pay the charcoal burners to go to cut trees without the consent of the chief in the road. And we are worried. When you go to the forest officers and you complain about that, they will throw you, you take them to police. Where do we go? The problem is we don't know what to do as chiefs. First of all, there's no consent for the people to cut trees in our areas. If they are making money, where is the benefit for the community in the chiefdom? It's so awkward that the legal framework is not straight. If you want the chiefs to be empowered, give them power. If I apprehend somebody in my chiefdom, I must have the power to report him to either the police or to court of law straight to get things done. Not going here and there, go to forest officers, go to police, nothing is done. We have a problem. We end up with just talking. I don't know.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness. I think that is why this event is called the Environmental Protection Dialogue. It is only in the dialogue where we could sit in this manner, where we have government officials, the Royal Highnesses, the civil society organizations, and I should mention that this is an action-oriented meeting where different interventions will be developed. So we have gotten your consent, and we are looking forward that at the end of this meeting, those are some of the issues that will be in the final report. We are not going to have a report with recommendations. We are going to have a report with action-oriented interventions. So this is a dialogue where we will have win-win solutions to the environmental protection issues that we are having. I thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Shitima. We appreciate your responses. I will then go to, I don't know if she's already here, that is Mrs. Mayando. Has she arrived? She's not yet here. Then I will go ahead, I will then invite ActionAid Zambia to give a presentation on mining taxation and regulations, and this will be made by Musonda Kabinga. I welcome you, sir.
Excuse me, before you go away, where is this team there?
Your Royal Highness, the response to that was they were with us for the official opening, and they have gone, but they will be with us tomorrow.
We had a number of questions to ask those people there. A number of questions.
We will try to look into that, Your Royal Highness.
From what they've been talking about.
Thank you. I'm having two hands. Is this the question? Your Royal Highnesses, are there questions regarding the previous presenter or the high table that we had in the morning? Your Royal Highness, you can go ahead.
Yes, Madam, thank you. I'm still on Chaco programs. You see, Chaco now is business. Like Choma has got 3 chiefdoms. You see, Chaco is transported up to here in Lusaka. We should allow this Chaco just within the district maybe, but not transporting it up to Lusaka. Trucks and their trucks coming from Choma district. How can we stop that or control that? How can we work? Because what I know in Choma Forest Department, they don't even have a vehicle to monitor or to work with us like before. Now we are trying, our capacitors are beaten, our neighborhood are beaten, but we say climate change is there. How can we control that? That's why I bear with Honorable Macha, that those people like the minister want to talk to her so that we can take the input back. You see? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness. We have taken note of that. We will get in touch with government representatives that we're working closely with. I will go ahead to invite Mr. Musonda Kabinga to make his presentation on mining taxation and regulations. We are hoping that we need to be ahead of time to go for our lunch and come back to the afternoon sessions where we'll be having the panel discussions, and we will be giving opportunity to the Royal Highnesses to raise all the key issues that are affecting their chiefdoms as well as our country. I welcome you, sir, Mr. Kabinga.
Good afternoon, distinguished delegates. I'll use a PowerPoint presentation, so request for some support. Okay, so I think I will be very brief, bearing in mind that this is 13. So I think I will try to maybe just speak to the issues of taxation so much, so I may skip some slides. Next slide. Okay, so this is basically what I'll talk about. You can go to the next slide. This slide, I'll skip it for now. Okay, so as you can see that if you look at issues of taxation, I think you might agree with us that the mining sector contributes a lot in terms of the tax revenue, and not only that, also in terms of exports. As you can see from the slides, that according to the EITI report, you can see that the contribution is quite huge in terms of the contribution to GDP, and also in terms of the exports. You can go to the next slide. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so I think I want to focus so much on this, the issue of major issues relating to mining taxation. Just to begin by saying that it has been established that globally there is a lot of illicit financial flows linked to the mining sector around issues of taxation. And recently in Zambia we saw that the Zambian High Court fined a named mining company of an amount of around 13 million for tax avoidance. Added to that, we know that ZRA recently unearthed a scam in which a named mining company had been evading taxes. And the information is that this mining company had been misclassifying imports so that they take advantage of some tax regime to be able to avoid paying taxes. Okay, so also the Financial Intelligence Center also recently just observed that there are certain methods that are used to evade taxes, which include repatriation of proceeds from mining company in Zambia to offshore accounts. So basically here it involves issues around where companies trade amongst each other. We know that Zambia as a country has signed certain tax agreements with other countries. So some of these tax agreements, when you look at them, they are very low or zero tax rates. So for instance, you find that we know that withholding taxes, for instance, on consultant services is maybe 10 to 15%. But when you go in a particular agreement, you may find that it's between 0 and 5%. So studies have shown that you find that some companies take advantage of that, where they trade amongst each other. So it's company A here trading with company B, which is situated in a country where Zambia has a tax agreement with. So they are trading, they are taking advantage of that tax agreement. And sometimes when you research more and you dig deeper, you find that that particular company in country B, they are just there to take advantage of that tax agreement. Maybe they are registered elsewhere, but because where they are coming from, there is no that agreement between Zambia and that country, they opt just to have some minor presence in a particular country where Zambia has a tax agreement with. So that minor presence is just something that, for instance, you may find that they may not even have a fully established office, but they are just incorporated or registered there, so that they are able to take advantage of that. And when they move resources, they usually take advantage of that tax agreement. So this could relate, for instance, to issues around maybe management or technical services. So the company will claim to have hired some services from another company, which is another country, and huge resources of money are involved. And we know that when you engage a consultant, you are required to pay, to withholding taxes on contract fees. So they take advantage of that because there are very minimal tax rates included in that tax agreement. Okay, next slide. The other issue also relates to issues of transfer pricing. I'll just try to explain this in very simple terms. We know that, for instance, if a ream of paper maybe on the market costs 5 kwacha, but because me as company A with another sister company, company B, we were trading amongst each other, maybe there is that situation where the price is inflated. So instead of maybe 60 kwacha, that ream of paper, maybe we are transacting at 100 kwacha. So me as company A, when I'm paying that 100 kwacha, I'm increasing my production costs. I'm showing that my costs are higher. And we know that when costs are higher, then I may be in a loss-making situation, because I'm showing that I'm incurring a lot of costs in terms of maybe supplies that I need to go in production. So when I'm moving that 100 kwacha, I'm moving to another company. But you find that on the international market, maybe that price is 50 kwacha as an example. So when we talk about this issue of transfer mispricing, there is need, for instance, to ensure that at least we have a very good big database that shows comparable prices for internationally traded goods, so that we are able to know, to say, no, I think the price of this particular commodity on the international market, this is the price. So even when we look at a company that says, no, we are in loss making, our costs are higher, we look at what is making those costs to be higher. When we check on the transaction, we are able to determine, to say, but if we are claiming we are purchasing this, what about on the international market? This is maybe the price that is there. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so I also mentioned that the Financial Intelligence Center, it was noted that there is undervaluation of precious metals, base metals that are exported. So when you undervalue, of course there's a tax implication there. Because for instance, if you are supposed to sell at 100 kwacha, which means maybe you have made more money, so even your tax liability, you are likely to pay the equivalent of that, which is slightly higher because you have made the profit higher. But when you undervalue, you are showing like your costs are lower because you are maybe selling at a very low cost. Okay, so another issue with regards to issues of mining taxation. Remember, there has been this issue of when we are looking at determining income tax, we are looking at maybe certain things that we need to deduct from there. So for instance, we know that the interest payment, you can consider that as a cost. So when we look at that, we are saying deductibility of interest payments from profits with determining taxable income. So there is an implication because you are deducting that from the income that you would have made. You can go to the next slide. Then there has been an issue to say our tax regime changes frequently, which is very true. And I think the mining sector has raised that issue to say we need a very stable tax regime. And basically that slide also just tries to agree with that. I think we're going to... Okay, now we have the issue of COVID now. So there's also been concerns to say the world, we are in difficult times right now. So how do we also support the mining sector? So there are some short-term policy options that we consider in the midst of COVID. So for instance, how do we ensure that the mines are also supported around issues of accelerating the VAT payments? How do we also ensure that there are input duty waivers? Then also in other countries, there's consideration to say that the state can increase their stake in the short term so that that can beef up the income base of a particular mining company just in short term so that the mines are able to survive. So that's also being considered. So these are some of the measures, like the short-term measures that can be considered. But there are also the do not do tax policy measures. So for instance, why would we give a waiver on income or profit tax? Because if you don't make a profit, you don't pay. A profit tax is given when you have made a profit, you pay. If you don't make a profit, you don't pay. So ideally, we shouldn't give a tax waiver on profit taxes because if you don't make a profit, you normally don't pay. So there is no need to have that waiver. Then also, there is issues around dividends. We know that there are certain stakeholders who invest and they get their dividends as well. So we know that for you to get a dividend, then it means there could be some good proceedings that have come as a result of that mining investment. So we are saying we should refrain from that. Then also, we also need to look at environmental taxes. I think the main issue that we are also talking about here, because with the environment, the degradation that is going on, I think we also need to up our game to ensure that if we have these taxes, we are able to invest in the mines. So, but there should be conditions for tax relief. Ideally, we are looking at retaining all workers for you to at least try to access the tax relief. Then there's a controversial issue to say, for tax relief, what about companies that have been in the habit of avoiding taxes? Why should they also get tax relief? Because when they avoid, they don't pay. So if you don't pay, you are already not paying. Why should you even get a tax relief? So there are also those issues. Then I think there is the issue of transfer pricing. You can go to the last slide, I think so. So those are our recommendations. I think in the interest of time, I won't read them. I think people can see. I think I'll end here for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I will now open for questions. We are going to take 4 questions. Mr. Clarence Musonda, first before you go ahead, I will, in the interest of time, I will request that our questions are are simplified. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Moderator, and a big thanks to ActionAid, Mr. Musonda. That was a nice presentation. I was hoping that also on one of the recommendations, you were also going to add to say, as much as we have other companies, other mining companies, not maybe giving the actual taxes, but also we need to talk about the priority spending. How are we spending these tax money that we are receiving as a country? I'm aware that the environmental budget this year, as given by the minister, has even gone low. And yet we know that climate change is one of the major challenges this whole world is facing. I have been to Lufwanyama and other mining towns, and I see that the infrastructure, the road and everything is not up to date. We are hoping to use ActionAid as a big international organization, also working here in Zambia with other partners to ensure that we advise government correctly and accordingly, so that in as much as we are pushing for these taxes to be given, but also on the priority spending.
Thank you so much. Please, let's be brief with our questions. And we'll take I will take 4 questions at once, and then shall be able to respond. Then who has a second question? Yes, Your Highness.
Thank you very much, ActionAid. My question is really on Mamba Coriolis and Kolam Mine, because that's the area where I'm coming from. I would really wonder whether those two companies pay tax to the government. So, just for the purpose of us to know also, because the road which leads to Mamba Mine and Kolam Mine is not there. The around that road is completely destroyed. So my major reason of asking is to really know from you, if at all you have an idea as to whether these people contribute to the taxation of to taxes towards this country.
Thank you so much for that question. Can we have the third question? Yes, Your Highness, kindly go ahead.
Thank you very much, ActionAid. I just wanted for you to shed more light on from the very beginning. You mentioned to the House to say there is a certain company which was evading tax. I don't know this company, the way they were evading tax. I just wanted there if you could shed more light. And second, I don't know the way they tax, the way we do it, or we can do it as a country. What type of mechanism or way can we do it? Do they apply tax before production or after production when it comes to mining taxation? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Highness, for that question. Can we get the last question? Yes, Ma'am, kindly go ahead with the question.
In appreciating the presentation, I just want to find out, in understanding this taxation and the topic, how does the role of the youth fit in protecting the natural resources? Because I thought that was the discussion. And also, how do the royal establishment fit in this taxation? Because I am aware that the taxation is about finished products, how does it impact on the royal establishments?
Thank you so much for that question. I will now hand over to Musonda to respond to the four questions. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for those very useful observations and questions. I think I'll start on the question number 3. I think we gave an example of how a company has been, they have been evading taxes. I think the scam that was unearthed by ZRA. So just to explain further by saying that according to the investigation by ZRA, they were saying this company was misclassifying imports. So there is a waiver on imports because the mines, they import capital expenditure as an example. So they say, for instance, I'll just give a very simple example. If this is a big machinery, for you to import this machinery, which is needed in the mines, there is a waiver to say your duty, instead of paying 15% as an example, you pay 5%. Because we know that this machinery is needed to help the mine, to boost the mine. So by misclassifying the imports, they misclassify to show that they have imported such machinery to take advantage of that waiver. So if at 15% as an example of taxes, they were supposed to pay 100 kwacha. By misclassifying the imports, showing that they have imported this machinery when it's not, they have avoided paying the taxes. So the machinery that they would have imported is this, and this machinery is not on the waiver. To import this machinery, it costs 100 kwacha. It's not on the waiver. This machinery is on the waiver. So they import this machinery and misclassify to show that they have imported this. So by so doing, they ended up avoiding that 100 kwacha, that is a tax on this machinery which is not on the waiver. So I've just given a very simple example. So that was the scam that ZRI unearthed, where they said that because of that, this company avoided paying huge sums of money in taxes. Then in line with that, I think you addressed the question of how do we look at this issue of taxation. There have been concerns to say the taxes paid on profits, they are challenging to capture. What do I mean? Because for you to determine that I have made profit, you have to check my my costs, for example. So there has been those concerns to say, you may recall the reason why there was change from at some point from the profit taxes to the mineral, because it was the issue to say it's very difficult to determine the profit. Because for you to determine the profit, you have to look at my expenses. Now, those same expenses, remember in my presentation I said they are impacted by a number of things. We are trading amongst each other, the prices are higher, the water. By the end of the day, it shows that me, for instance, I'm not making any profit. So there has been those concerns for profit taxes because the nature of the transactions for the mines, they are sophisticated and complicated. So there has been those concerns, and that's why we now said, okay, let's go back to the mineral royalty. And as at now we have the graduated mineral royalty. You know that the price of copper is 6,000 per ton. So if the price of copper is 6,000 per ton, this tons of the copper that you have produced, looking at the price of copper, then you are able to determine the tax. So I hope I've tried to address. So here the point is that there has been those concerns to say profit taxation has had these challenges that I've said, because it can be difficult, for instance, to determine the profits that have been made. So that has been some of those concerns. I hope I've tried to address your question. Then the other is on the tax expenditure. it's a very big discussion. People say, why should we even talk about taxes? Because first of all, we're not even seeing how the money is being used. And if you look at where we are now, when you read the Auditor General's report, you read the FIC reports, you really see that there's a lot of wastage of resources. So it has been a very big issue to say, even when we talk about taxes, at least can we also show that the money we are collecting is being put to good use? And for us also, we totally agree with your observation to say the issue of tax expenditure should be enhanced as well. And that's why we need to ensure that we have strong regulation that ensures that any wastage of resources, like for instance the Public Expenditure Management Act, where it talks about certain expenditure as wasteful, and you know when you have, as a controlling officer, when you have facilitated or when there is that wasteful expenditure, you are held accountable. But also the other issue has been also the Public Procurement Act, and it's good that there is a bill now, and some of the issues that people have raised is the same issue that I spoke about, to say even the issue of standard pricing, benchmarking of prices, because certain products or services are acquired at a higher price. So how do we have in the same ministry, we are procuring maybe at different prices? So in that law, there's a proposal in the bill to say let's strengthen the benchmarking of prices. We have the prices we know. The other issue has been the issues around contract management as well, so that we don't have issues where a company is engaged, then we go back and say, I think here maybe we didn't do better. How do we ensure that there's proper contract management around that? So these are some of the issues that we think can also help to improve expenditure, because it's about how do we ensure that the public sector, there's proper utilization of money. What legal frameworks can we have to ensure that there is proper utilization of money? Like one of the things was the issue to do with the limited bidding or emergency procurement in the public procurement law. So how do you determine that this procurement is an emergency? So if, for instance, we are supposed to procure umbrellas, okay, we know that the rainy season starts in October. Then you have the money in January, they are not procuring the umbrella. February, not procuring the umbrella. Then now when it reaches October, when the first rains have come, then you say, can we procure? This is an emergency. So all these are things that we need to look at, because they have a bearing on the way public finances are used. So I think on tax expenditure, these are some of the things that need to be enhanced. But of course, we need a lot of discussions so that we ensure that tax expenditure is improved. This is really a big issue. On the issue of Mamba mine, I think it's something that we have taken note with, maybe engaging just to find out. I think we have taken note of the concern raised. We may not have as at now information to say whether they are paying or not, but it's something that we can pursue, and hoping that even as we interact over lunch, we can even engage more and discuss more on this issue. The issue of youth, lastly, is very important, because whatever we are saying here has a big bearing on the youth, because Zambia is a youth population. So all the tax expenditure, we know that a lot of goods and services are procured or are consumed by the young people. We know that education, health, there are young people that are there. And when we talk about expenditure, we are also ensuring that when we spend more on quality education, on health, we have a youthful, healthy population that can contribute to the development of the country. The last point on the role of the chiefs, it's a very important observation, and I know that there are a lot of initiatives that the royal establishment have undertaken, but just to echo by saying that I think there's also a need to ensure that we also support the local citizens in terms of information dissemination. And that's where we also see as civil society, for instance, how do we partner and work with the chiefs in ensuring that this information we are talking about, we are also able to sensitize and conscientize the citizens so that it's them that are able to demand, it's them that will be able to demand for improved tax expenditure so that they can, so that their rights can be fulfilled, so that money is spent on quality education, quality health. So I think from where we are sitting is the issue of how do we enhance perhaps the collaboration. And I say this taking into account that there could be other interventions that are already existing, but how do we strengthen the collaboration with the civil society? I know that there's a lot of work that has gone in on land, environment, but perhaps also how do we strengthen the tax discussion with the chiefs so that we are able to work together and try to lobby that as a country we have more progressive tax systems. I think I'll end here. I may not have all the body of knowledge, but I know that our colleagues, the other civil society organizations are here, and I think we can interact more on some of these even over lunch. I think.
Thank you so much for that, for the responses. I think we have come to the end of our morning session. We are actually behind schedule. Our lunch is ready, and their Royal Highnesses, they will have their lunch from the same room where they had their tea break. Before we go for the tea break, I will invite Henry Malumo from ActionAid. We are scheduled to have a New Deal for Nature campaign briefing this evening, and we just want to highlight in less than 2 minutes so that we could have our lunch. We are expected to be back in plenary. That is about, we are hoping, we are expected to be back in the plenary at 14:30 so that we can get started with the panel discussions. Some of these issues, I think during the panel discussions, they will be highlighted and we can ask more questions for clarifications. Mr. Malumo, sir. Mr. Kabinga, thank you so much. You can take your seat.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Just to make a correction, yes, Henry Malumo was at ActionAid. I'm still an ActionAid, I guess, but today I'm working with WWF, and I'm here to talk about an exciting event. This morning, the minister announced that she has become the New Deal for People, the New Deal for Nature and People campaign ambassador. It is that conversation that I'm inviting you to. So this evening, from about 5:30 to 6:30, from 17:30 to about 18:30, we'll be having a cocktail, an information session, basically to introduce you to this exciting campaign, the New Deal for People and Nature. It's a campaign for nature restoration, and I'm inviting all of you to come through, and we'll gladly engage and talk in detail about this campaign that the minister alluded to earlier and became the ambassador. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you so much. Just before we go, I will request Mr. Mtambanshiku to bless our lunch, and then we could proceed. Mr. Mtamba, sir.
Shall we pray? Thank you, Jehovah God, for the time you have given us to gather in this house. We thank you for the wisdom that has been displayed since morning over this important matter which touches on your creation. We want to thank you, God, for the leadership that you have given Center for Environmental Justice to bring the Royal Highnesses, ministers, and the excellencies, and all the family that looks at the welfare of this country in terms of environmental management. We are very grateful. At this moment, we ask you to bless the food that is before us, to nourish our bodies so that we can have the energies to continue discussing this important matter. We thank you in the mighty name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. You are all invited for lunch. I thank you.
Sorry, Chairperson, again, a reminder of where the event will be. It's right through that, the room that is right across. It's room 3. That is the new Dew for Nature and People cocktail. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Henry.
Just a special announcement concerning how we proceed with lunch. There are some coupons that there are 2 rooms that we are going to use for eating lunch from. So I'm going to allow the invited guests and also the chiefs, they will use the dedicated room as they announced. But for the others, the invited guests and also our partners for the EPD, and the exhibitors, you might proceed to a cafe room. Someone, one of the ushers will guide you where to get the lunch. Then for the others, there's another room, a dedicated room this side. I have the coupons with me, so I'll guide you where to go. Thank you very much.